Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and tonight I'm joined by Chris McElwain. Big apologies for anyone who doesn't like my kitchen tiles. I'm not dialing in from the usual destination. Also a big apology if the Wi-Fi goes something awry. If it does, Chris will fill in the blanks. Chris, how have you been in my absence, young man?
Oh, stressed, boss, stressed. No, absolutely fine. We had a good show today, a bit poignant because it was obviously occurring at the same time as John Clark's funeral. So I know that a lot of our audience were actually either dual tuning in or tuning into that. The great thing about the show we do is obviously people can come back and watch the show later. But it was actually my first time on with Colin Watt, which was great. And we also had young James and Kev on. Lots of good discussion. We've finally got some kind of concrete transfer news. One just broke before we came online there with Inamura coming in the building, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And yeah, we took a little look forward to tonight's game as well. So yeah, it's you know what it's like during pre-season. We're sort of always scratching for things that are interesting to talk about. We're always waiting for that big, the news about a big signing. Normally we have to wait till the end of the window, but actually we've done business quite early this year, so we're getting more talking points than usual, which is great.
Well, tonight, Chris, I might deviate slightly from the focus on tonight's game because I haven't had a chance to talk about some of the things that you've mentioned there. And as I say, I'm apologising about the kitchen tiles. They were not my choice. But I don't want to offend anybody out there if they had a similar kitchen tile in their youth, or if their granny did as well. Because I'm going to put this out here in terms of what we do at a Celtic State of Mind. We go live 12:30 every single day, have done for over 5 years now, and we're going to continue to do that. Make no mistake, the thing might look a wee bit different soon, but 12:30 is when we go out. I've always likened it to Corrie 7:30. You don't have to watch it for 3 years, but it's always there. But in relation to that, people who are feeling upset because we were on at the same time as the service of John Clark, I've got to say this, we're in a different era now, Chris, whereby, we're not doing anything to offend anyone, but people will be perennially looking to be offended. And there's no better way to actually pay tribute or homage to John Clark than actually get a group of Celtic fans on a live stream to talk about the great man. And we did that this afternoon, so no apologies in relation to that whatsoever. And as you say, it's out there, and it's out there for the rest of the night, and it's out there for the rest of the time for other people to catch up on it, Chris. So I know that was one of the things. I was watching it myself, and I felt it was a bit unfair on the guys who were chatting. We have shown nothing but, and will continue to show nothing but respect for John Clark and any other ex-Celt who sadly passes away. But that's not the purpose of us going out this afternoon. There was no disrespect whatsoever. And the thing in relation to that I feel has to be said is that we're not in a situation where we've got to take every single bit of criticism and say you're right, because that's not the case. The flip side of that is there was comments on the show the other day, just before I headed off, and it was in relation to the Catholic Church, and I apologise for them because I don't think the comments were right. I don't think this was the right platform for them. I've clipped the comments and I've spoken to the people involved, and that's it. But we are in a situation, Chris, where people are looking to be offended, so hopefully my kitchen tiles don't offend anyone.
I'm not offended by the kitchen tiles. I'm just pleased you're with me tonight. But yeah, it was a very good show today in terms of some of the talking points. Good diverse opinions, I think. It's the advantage of having so many contributors on Acsom, as you've got Kev, who's definitely got views on certain things. He chucked a couple of grenades in today, a couple of quite controversial points that we might have to bookmark around Carter Vickers for one, and whether or not he's legitimately injured or if this is a potential, exit strategy, which I thought was interesting. Don't necessarily share that view, but I think it's always good to see those diverse viewpoints. So yeah, good show today. Really great to see Colin. First time I've been on with him, and obviously having him host, and I thought he did a great job hosting. Really structured, good agenda. But you're right. I mean, we appreciate it's a sad day today. I've managed to catch up on some of the footage of John Clark's funeral. Fantastic turnout. Amazing to see people who. What really got me was people like Ian Wright, for example, and Roy Keane, who wouldn't have spent a lot of time in John Clark's company as Celtic players. Come to pay their respects. You had personnel from Rangers, you had personnel from various different football clubs and different roles. And I think it was a real measure of of the type of man and the impact that John Clark had on people, that his funeral and even the procession that went past Paradise, past Celtic Park, was attended the way it was. I think it was at the very least the most fitting send off that you could hope to give the man. And I think. What can we say? I mean, God's assembling a hell of a football team, right, at the moment, with some of the players that we've lost. Not only Celtic players, obviously, we also mentioned Diogo Jota and his younger brother Andre today as well, who sadly passed away yesterday. And I think both the loss of John Clark and the recent loss of Diogo Jota and his brother. It puts into perspective how important it is to appreciate the time you've got with people, even as supporters. And, we're fortunate enough to have seen some fantastic players over the years as we advance in age, being able to still, go to various events, associate, meet these players. I still see people like Peter Grant and Johan Mjällby and players like Chris Sutton. These are my heroes, and I appreciate they won't be there forever. So appreciate the time that we have with them, because once they're gone, we feel the loss.
We absolutely do, Chris. We do feel the loss. There was something else. It was a player who came to Celtic really late in their career. I was watching a wee video with him earlier on. It was Pat Stanton. And the way that Hibs TV did this was brilliant. And I would actually, I would say to every football fan, not just Celtic fan, go and watch this. Go and check it out on Hibs TV. Etc. And Pat Stanton was basically told, you're coming up to Easter Road, we're going to do a wee bit an interview about the 150th anniversary, etc. Got him to sit in a stand, and they handed him a letter from the chairman, and he read it out, and you could see he was fighting back the tears, Chris, because the announcement within this letter was, the stand you're sitting in right now, we're going to name that the Pat Stanton stand. And it touched him. It really did, right? And the first thing, and this is a thing that I shared with the group, the first thing he spoke about was how his dad would have felt.
Yes.
And I'm not saying this is always the way. It's not always the way, Chris, but you've got that connection with when you started going to games as a kid. And obviously, Pat Stanton's Hibs through and through. He came to Celtic, and he was brilliant with Celtic. Won us a double, and that, it was the last hurrah really of Jock Stein in 1977. He was fantastic, and then he got injured, and then he retired. He's a Hibby. He's Hibs through and through. But it was what really brought home to me was the fact that he had that connection through his old man. So the football brought back memories of his dad, and his dad, who obviously took him to the games when he was younger, and he was like, my dad would be really proud today. And I love that. And that he's a Hibs legend. John Clark's a Celtic legend. You've got to celebrate them. Hibs have named a stand after Paddy Stanton. I think the Lisbon Lions obviously have got a stand in their memory. But I say it again, get the bronze statues all the way up the Celtic way. Absolutely.
I would, yeah. Do you know, I've got visions of, because, I've been fortunate enough to go to Celtic Park quite frequently recently, either going to press events or I took my little boy up there the other day we did the kind of Hoopies Fun Day, which was great. Lots of fans there. Quite a few of the new third kit there actually as well, so it was interesting to see that up front, up close. But as you go up the Celtic way, and particularly in the sunshine, Celtic Park looks amazing. I know that the stadium needs work, but the whole surrounding of Celtic Park, certainly, the front fascia looks fantastic. But I always think, if you imagine bronze statues of the Lisbon Lions adorning the Celtic way, every one of them, why not? Every one of them was equally important, including those that didn't necessarily play. I mean, you would have John Hughes in there, you would have Fallon in there, you would have the guys that just immortalise them. Right, immortalise them. I know some people have different views on statues and whether it's an appropriate enough memorial, but I just think when someone like me, even though I wasn't old enough to witness the Lisbon Lions and see John Clark and his teammates play live, Billy McNeil was the first Celtic manager I can remember. He was. Bertie Auld, a larger-than-life character. My dad telling me stories of the Lions, being able to see them, and Jock Stein, the manager, this enigmatic figure. When I think about Celtic, you cannot think about Celtic or associate with Celtic without the Lisbon Lions. They are absolutely ingrained in the history of the football club. So why not? Why not give every single one of them a statue? Because they changed the face of this club. They changed the face of Celtic Football Club on world football, on a world stage, in the biggest competition on the planet. They stood up stood against the best, and they, and they did something that nobody expected them to do. And I don't think under the same circumstances will ever happen again. So I would have every single one of them lining that Celtic way, and not for them leading people into the park, but just so that nobody can get to that park without acknowledging how great these guys were.
Without a doubt, before I speak, I'm just going to apologise again in case anybody is hearing any kind of glitches. I am streaming on a pager somewhere in deepest, darkest Celtic, so unfortunately I might break up, but Chris will run with that. Chris will also be bringing up the comments. I'm scared to touch my screen in case it breaks down. And he'll also be bringing up... There you go.
Talking of comments, I mean, honestly, the first comment I see, Stephen Kennedy, you certainly look old enough to remember that.
Bring it on. Bring it on, Stephen.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. Give us it tight. But yeah, I'm looking forward to tonight because we're back with the action. Obviously, we'll run through the team in a moment or two. But in terms of legends, and obviously that terminology, people can debate who should be deemed a legend and all that. Lisbon Lions and everybody connected with that. I think there was 20 in total, including the backroom team. Also, anyone that's made over 500 appearances for the club. There's only 14 of them now. Jimmy McGrory, greatest ever goal scorer. John Thompson lost his life on the park. These guys, they need to be remembered every single day up at Celtic Park. Absolutely. So I would love to see that. Yeah,
and I think, a more modern day legend, Tommy Burns. I would love to see Tommy Burns on there, whether it be, similar to what you mentioned about Pat Stanton there at Hibs. Why not get a stand for Tommy Burns or some sort of memorial, because the man lived
the academy.
Celtic. Yeah, the academy. Absolutely. It would absolutely resonate, without a shadow of a doubt. So there are so many figures that gave so much to the club, and the club meant so much to them, and subsequently they meant so much to not just the club but the supporters as well. So I would love to see people like that getting honoured as well. But look, the one great thing about Celtic is history doesn't end with the club. We continue to make history. Brendan Rodgers, I think, made good strides towards re-establishing us as a European force last year. I would love to see what we do this year. We've done some good business in transfer window rather. I think more is required, and we spoke about that today. But yeah, interesting to see how the youngsters do tonight. Talking about the game.
Absolutely. Bring the team up, Chris, and we'll have a wee chat through it. I don't want to touch the screen in case I break something.
Yep. And trusting me with the technology, half the viewers will be banned by the time we're finished.
Don't say that. You've done that now. You've got previous for that, young man.
I do.
Look at the team there, and this is the thing. And I don't mind admitting this, particularly once we got onto the bench. What I did was have a look at every single individual just to make sure I knew who they were and where they played. And so obviously setting that across to yourself. But one of the most interesting things here is when you look at that starting 11, what you would describe as first team players who are involved tonight, Chris. There are players also in there who have just joined, i.e. Ross Doohan, who came through the academy system with Celtic before leaving the football club. He starts in goal. But let's start off then with the guys that we know a bit about. You've got a central defensive partnership here. Now, I find this quite interesting. Don't quite subscribe to the CCV theory that Kevin had here earlier, but that's fine. We can all agree or disagree on that. But Trusty and Murray's a funny one because last season, Chris, Brendan Rodgers would have played Murray much more had he not been injured. Yeah. So the appearances that we've seen of Mike Nawrocki would have been appearances of Dane Murray. So I find that a really interesting inclusion, and I think he's going to be a big part of Brendan's plans this season.
Well, he's a player that the manager seems to rate. I think, as you say, he was keen to give Dane Murray an opportunity last season. Obviously, coming back from a significant injury, but then getting another injury setback must have been a real tough blow for a young player. Like his stature, big, tall, looks physically potent. Player, seems to read the game well. A lot of the reports we had is that, he's got a good game awareness, pretty good with the ball at his feet. And I think, he seemed to be in the frame for one that was capable of making that step up. So you're hoping that this is maybe a second dawn for him, and he'll get the chance to come back and reassert maybe his credentials in this team. I think it's interesting that he's partnered up with Austin Trusty. We didn't see a huge amount of Austin Trusty towards the end of last season. After he played a pretty big chunk in the middle of the season. So again, maybe another chance to see him. He's having a pre-season, maybe now much more familiar with his surroundings, much more familiar with the manager's expectations. So he's another one that could come in. But yeah, really, really pleased. Just from the player standpoint himself, really pleased to see Murray back in a starting lineup, and hope he has a good night tonight.
The other thing I would say about that on Trusty is, Trusty, Engels, and Ida came in for a lot of criticism or scrutiny. More scrutiny than criticism, I would say, in terms of the transfer fees paid out, etc. Trusty obviously was purchased to be a first choice, but by the end of the season, Scales had the jersey, Chris. And I think that going into this season, all eyes on Engels because of his price tag, etc., etc. I have no concerns about him. Ida, yeah, absolutely. He needs to be the number one striker, and I'm pretty sure we'll bring someone else in to challenge him. But Trusty's an interesting one because he needs to get himself in that starting 11 as a perfect foil, really, to Cameron Carter-Vickers. We know that Brendan Rodgers likes Dane Murray. We're not so sure if he's 100% sold on Austin Trusty, particularly after that Dens Park comment at the side of the park. We all know what he said that night in relation to Trusty. So, yes, it's Queen's Park. We are playing a second-tier team, etc. tonight, Chris, but every single player will be under scrutiny. You move into the midfield, of course. Strong midfield. Callum McGregor, Andy Engels and Luke McCowan. McGregor, if he's fit, he plays.
Yeah, I think that raised a few eyebrows, seeing just as, two established first-team players in that midfield with McGregor and Engels, and then an established member of the first-team squad in McCowan, making up that midfield three. From a personal standpoint, I'm a little disappointed that we are seeing, three, well-known first-team players in there. I would have quite liked to see McArdle, come in from the start. We got some relatively positive-looking cameos from McArdle last season. He is on the bench, but I would have thought, well, surely it's an opportunity to give him some minutes for the start, give him an opportunity maybe to play alongside a Callum McGregor, and you've got Engels or McCown to come off the bench. The Engels one's probably the most puzzling for me. Engels, for me, is not a player that we need another look at in a pre-season friendly. I'm keen to see what Engels can do once the season starts, but I'm not 100% sure why we need to see him in a friendly. Maybe the manager will give him limited minutes tonight and then start to bring on some of the youngsters, which is fair enough. But I would have liked to have seen a couple of the youngsters, McArdle in particular, because he did make that breakthrough towards the end of last season. We did get to see him in competitive football, and I would like to see him get more opportunities this season. So this would have been, for me, the perfect opportunity to do that. I guess the fear whenever you get the your established first team stars in a friendly is, what if they're on the end of a mistimed or particularly rough tackle, and you've got the Champions League qualifier coming up. So there's obviously an element of risk there as well. But yeah, minutes in the legs, as someone's pointed out in the comments, I think is a fair point. Maybe give them 30 minutes, 45 minutes. If the game's going well, get some of the youngsters in.
Yeah, you would hope to see as many as possible. And I'm also looking at the cooperation agreement that obviously we're going to have next season with Queen's Park as well. How many of these young guys will be sent on loan to Queen's Park to get game time? That's going to be very interesting. I'm going to run through obviously all the names for anyone who's not familiar with some of the kind of younger players. But it's great to see Jude Bonner getting a start. And you look at Adam Montgomery, I'm guessing he'll be on the left-hand side, with probably Jude Bonner on the right and Johnny Kenny through the middle. There's been some talk that Kenny might also leave this summer, Chris. I did think when we brought in young Callum Osman, I thought to myself, he is more or less a replacement for our third choice, rather than really pushing for a first-team jersey. And so it wouldn't surprise me if Johnny Kenny was to leave the building, but apparently we're looking for £1 million for him.
Yeah, it's a strange one. We spoke a little bit about it, earlier this week and today as well. It's Johnny Kenny for me. We don't see what he does in training, right? But Callum McGregor, for example, has been talking him up today or the last 24 hours, saying he's really matured, he's looking much more comfortable, he's shown a lot of ability in training. That's great. We didn't really get enough opportunities to see it towards the end of last season. In the flashes, he looked like someone who was pretty capable of giving defenders, certainly domestic-based defenders, a bit of a hard time. Put his physicality about a bit. Was a little bit of a bully up top, which I liked. Good pace. And actually, when he did get his goal eventually, which was the header, good positioning, showed good willingness to get in there. I think there's a player there. I would almost feel very, very confident that if Johnny Kenny was to go to another club, maybe another league or another club, and just get a consistent run. I think he could be a very, very prolific striker. But obviously at our club at the moment and within this side, there's only one starting berth for a striker, an out-and-out striker. So the competition is very, very fierce. Callum Osman's come in now from Fulham, very highly rated. He's getting talked up by figures such as Jeff Stelling down south. You know, a lot of people saying he's got the ability to come up here and hit the ground running. So the pressure is on a player like Johnny Kenny to show that he deserves to be at the club. And he's not he's not just in the door. You know, he's been associated with the club for a couple of years now. Had a decent spell on loan, came back, and I think all of us thought we'd see a bit more from him. And we don't know the circumstances why he didn't play more, but the fact is that, you know, his place, I think more than any of the other strikers at the moment, is under threat in this at this club. And, you know, as you say, £1 million. If we were offered that, it'd be a hard one to turn down at the moment, given the fact that we've brought a player like Osman in and the manager's still got opportunities to strengthen further. So, yeah, again, keen to see what he can do from the start. It'll be interesting tonight when we've got Bonner. And I think, who's the other player on the other side? Was it
Montgomery?
Montgomery, yeah. So, I think with Bonner and Montgomery, can they do the job that a lot of the supporters have been crying out for, is to hit that byline and get service into the front man. So if Kenny gets some good service from these guys tonight, then, you know, it gives the manager food for thought.
You know, there's lots of different things that can be taken from the performances this evening. But I look at Adam Montgomery, I think to myself, is he one of these players who may well be in a kind of last chance saloon at Celtic? He spent a period of last season at Queen's Park and played in that famous victory at Ibrox, obviously, that resulted in Clement losing his job. But Montgomery, through a combination of changes in management and also injuries, has been something of a bit part player for a number of seasons. Yep. And you think to yourself, for the player's sake, he gets to that age, Chris, where he needs to play far more regularly than he has done, particularly in the Celtic team. So tonight might be a big night in relation to where he plays his football next season. Can I run through some of the guys that might be lesser known players within the Celtic squad? And by the way, Chris, let me know, how am I sounding? Can you still hear me? Can you still see me?
You're coming through absolutely fine for me. I don't think anyone on the comments is missing you. They're all talking about your tan, so I'm assuming they can see you fine as well. Yeah,
that is a spray tan. I'm definitely not on holiday. Right, here we go. So, Samuel Iziguzo is a Celtic under-18 defender, and he finds himself on the bench tonight. You've got Connor Daly, who's a midfield Celtic youth, aged just, let me double check that actually.
16,
because it says here he's only 16, which is fantastic. That really is. Just in terms of the age of Iziguzo, he's 18. So it's great to see these young guys. Some of them we'll know a wee bit more about. Thomas Hatton, 18 years of age. He is with the Celtic B squad and he's a left winger. Might see him in the second half. Francis Turley, a player that I've actually really liked every single time I've seen him. 19 years of age, and he plays in the central midfield position. So I'm pretty sure in the second half we'll see a bit of him. Sean McArdle, we know a wee bit more about. 17-year-old central midfielder. Would love to see him in and about the first team squad this season. Mitchell Robertson, another B team player, 20-year-old now. He's a centre back. And we've got Kyle Ewer, who won the Player of the Year actually last season. He's only 19 and he plays in central midfield as well. Ben McPherson, interesting thing about Ben, he was in and around the friendly games last season. He's 21 now. He's a right back. He's actually shown up as being out of contract just now. So I don't know if we've maybe re-signed him, Chris, and it's not been announced, or indeed he's playing this game actually as the old school trialist. It takes us back to only an excuse. That great player, trialist. Josh Clark.
Let's say that he's without a club actually, which is interesting.
Yeah, aye. But again, it's maybe just one of the ones that's not been announced just yet. Goalkeeper Clark, 20 years of age, from the north of Ireland. Ben Summers, fresh from a loan deal out. He's 21. He's an attacking midfielder. He's played for the first team under Ange Postecoglou. We know a wee bit more about guys like him and Jude Bonner, central midfielder, although I think he'll be playing on the right. He'll be playing on the Nicholas Kuhn side of the park. We'll talk about him later. He's only 19 years of age. Mitchell Frame, we've seen him playing in Europe. He's only 19. He's a left back. Be interesting to see how he plays. Is he going to be the backup? Is Inamura coming in as a backup to Kieran Tierney? Dane Murray, 22-year-old, been kicking around since Ant Postecoglou's very first game against Midtjylland, plagued by injuries, highly rated. Another ex-Queen's Park loanee, Toby Uwulayemi, who has been out on loan at Dunfermline. Again, now or never for a guy like him, 22.
Seems like he's been there for such a long time. He's been at the club longer than some of the first team players.
Yeah, he's. I think he's 6 years at the football club, Chris. We signed him from Spurs, and he's never broken into the first team. He's had three loan deals out. Kobe Donovan, I've liked Donovan actually when I've seen him, and that was based on what he did in the last pre-season. 18 years of age, another right back. So there's plenty of talent there, Chris. But again, it would be nice to see some of them on loan out at Queen's Park next season. I've not had a chance to speak about Kuhn on the basis of not appearing on the bulletin. And a few messages back and forward to the Acsom troops over the last few days. My take on Nicholas Kuhn is this. We took a punt on Nicholas Kuhn at £3.5 million. He had shown real promise with Rapid Vienna. Every time he had gone to what you would describe as a bigger club or a bigger league, he had failed to make the grade, right? Leipzig, Ajax, Bayern Munich failed to make the grade. Comes to Celtic, and initially we're looking at him thinking, he's another dud. We'd had so many wingers who were duds. He looked like he was joining that category of the Tilios and the Palmas and the Yangs. But he came through. He had a scintillating start to the season. There was a point though, because I think you give him all the credit. 21 goals from the wing. Brilliant, Chris. Entertaining player. He scores goals, he makes goals. Fantastic. He was the player of the year up to a point. Best player in Scottish football. But if you're going to give him all the plaudits, you've also got to say his form fell off a cliff. He was hooked at half-time on 2 occasions in big games for Celtic. He failed to win a 60-40 against St Johnstone at McDermott Park, would have resulted in a goal being scored, and he gave Celtic fans that kind of celebration at Tannadice. So you've got to take the rough with the smooth with him. How much is he worth? Is he worth only 16 million? Is he worth more than that? I think the doubts will probably surround the fact that he has not smashed it every time he's been in that position at a big club. Now, Celtic are not in one of the biggest leagues in Europe, but we do compete in the Champions League, and he did well in the Champions League. Some are a bit disappointed with the transfer fee, Chris. I'm looking at it and thinking, if the player wants to leave, and if Brendan Rodgers wants him to leave, and I'm only looking at things like being hooked at half-time, the response to the Celtic fans at Tannadice, his poor form, the fact that the transfer window opens and he's got 2 clubs lined up. He's got Leipzig, he's got Como. So his agent's been putting out the word. Let's be honest, we can all understand how this works. £16 million is fine. Let him go. We'll get the sell-ons further down the line, if indeed Como make a profit on him, which they may or may not. But I know the situation with Como. I know they're spending a lot of money. They're throwing a lot of money at this. They seem quite ambitious. But they also have to stick to the financial fair play rules as well, Chris. When it comes down to it, their average attendances are something in the region of 18,000 a week. They came 10th in Serie A last season. I ask you the question, in the 4 years that he's signed up to play for Como, will they supersede, will they leapfrog Celtic in terms of Champions League endeavours? If so, great move, Nicholas. I can't see it though.
No, not on the surface of it at the moment. I would agree. I don't think he's going to what I'd consider a higher profile club. I respect the Italian league. I think it's a good league to go for. Particularly, Scottish players are thriving out there at the moment. So it's a decent move from a league standpoint. But I also look at some of the players that Como are signing. Is Kuhn actually going to be able to establish himself in that team for a start? And then you're right. We spoke about it today. You look at his perception as a journeyman player at the moment. A guy who's traversed from club to club to club to club and never quite managed to make that breakthrough. We thought we had it for half a season. We thought we had it for the best part, maybe 2/3 of a season, if I'm being, to be generous. We thought we had unlocked the mystery of Nicholas Kuhn, and we're getting the best of him. This is a guy who has been there all this time. We just had to find the right way to unlock the potential. And then, as you say, it fell off a cliff. And we don't know the reason for that. Is it motivation? Is it mentality? Is it fitness? Is it a combination of all three? Was his head turned? We won't know. But the fact is that the club seems to be keen to get business done early. And I think if the manager really wanted to keep the player, we would not be seeing this sort of concrete, I don't even want to call it speculation. It looks imminent now. It looks as though it's a kind of done deal. that for me tells me that club and manager are aligned on the future of Nicholas Kuhn. So in which case, get it done early. And you made the point. You know, okay, could we have got more if he'd continued his good form? Possibly. If he was to go and do another season in Europe and do well with us, could we get more money? Possibly, right? But we're still getting, what, 5.5 times roughly what we paid for him? I think a club that does business like ours, they're going to bite your hand off for that.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Well, that's my tuppence worth about Nicholas Kuhn. He won't be featuring tonight, Chris. I'm not even going to ask you for a prediction because the last time we played Queen's Park, it was 6-4. Nobody could have predicted that. But let's go and enjoy the action, and hopefully my dodgy Wi-Fi will hold up for the half-time break. It's been an absolute pleasure once again. Thanks for joining us on A Celtic State of Mind.
Hail, hail.